So a bit of a brief introduction. So Sue Wishart resides in Victoria and has been a judge of the Provincial Court of BC since 2009. In May 2016, she was appointed Associate Chief Judge. As Associate Chief Judge, she serves on various committees, including access to justice initiative, court technology, family and small claims rules reforms. She is also involved in specialized courts across the province, including Indigenous and First Nations sentencing courts and the Aboriginal Family Healing Courts, conference child protection projects in New Westminster, drug treatment and downtown community courts in Vancouver, and the Victoria and Kelowna integrated courts. So yeah, take over.
Thank you very much. And although a lot of my responsibilities as an associate chief judge involve family and small claims, my background as a lawyer was as a criminal defense lawyer. And so I'm also very interested and involved in the therapeutic courts and Victoria Integrated Court in particular. I've sat as a judge in that court for about 18 months at one point. I call Victoria Integrated Court doing what we can with what we already have, because there are no additional resources or money associated with Victoria Integrated Court. And it was really started at the, I guess it was an idea that came from the community on how do we deal with what was a high level of street crime and homelessness in Victoria, and how could the criminal justice system respond. And so in 2010, this court was created, and the basic idea is using services that already exist and using various community outreach teams that already existed and incorporating them into our court system. So there was no new court time added. We took existing court days. So for example, in Victoria, we have a criminal docket that's 5 days a week. We took Tuesday mornings and said any accused who is associated with one of these community outreach teams, we will deal with those people on Tuesday mornings. So the court has grown over the years and changed a bit, but I'll describe where we're at now in terms of this court. But the key features really are including the community outreach teams into the court process. So any client of integrated court, and we do call them clients, as many therapeutic courts do, they do have to be supported by an existing community outreach team. This may include, there are teams that are under the Ministry of Health. There are teams that are with Community Living BC, and most of those clients are people with brain injuries. We also have a few supportive housing agencies that have some wraparound services. So that is mandatory that somebody is attached to a team when they first appear in integrated court. They might not be connected yet, and there can be a process to see if they can be taken on by a team. And participation in this court is voluntary. So if somebody wants to go through the usual court, they're free to do so. This is a sentencing court. Some bail hearings occur in this court as well, but because it's only Tuesday mornings, obviously bail hearings need to happen at other times, but is mainly a sentencing court. And if there's somebody in integrated court who wishes to have a trial, they would be scheduled into a trial court the normal way. And when I describe this court, I refer to it as resource neutral-ish, because there is an additional workload for the prosecutor that is involved with this court, as well as the probation officer. And the integration of integrated court refers to really integrating information. So clients sign a consent form to share information amongst agencies, because we have health, We've got housing. We have the various other teams. We have resource providers, and they need to be able to share the information to effectively do the second part of the integration, which is integration of existing services. And because for a lot of the teams, their clients are vying for the same services, and by sharing information, we can better use those and better prioritize who is in the greatest need of an existing service. So the sharing of information is critical, and it really does lead to better outcomes in terms of using those services, better outcomes for the clients. And in my view, as a judge, you can make, excuse me, better orders on bail and sentencing because you have so much more information than I would have in a typical court day. So the court team consists of these community outreach team members who come to court every Tuesday morning. There's a police team, so it's usually 2 officers who are assigned to integrated court, and they're able to flag clients within their system. So if they or another officer is dealing somebody who is an integrated court client, rather than breach them, they can reach out to a team member to see if there's another way of dealing with whatever brings them into contact with the police. There's a dedicated probation officer assigned to this court. We have defense counsel, and it's usually the same, I would say 10 defense counsel who are participating. They're not specifically assigned, but they tend to be defense counsel who deal with these clients. There is an assigned prosecutor, and there is an assigned judge. And having that consistency, as I'm sure everybody knows, is very important because you actually develop a relationship with the clients. And that's very important from a therapeutic justice perspective. The information sharing works by having pre-court meetings. They used to occur on the court day earlier in the morning, but with the pandemic, they've switched to doing those virtually and now do it a few days before the Tuesday morning. So everybody meets, not the client and not the judge, but all of the other team members meet. They share information about what's happening with the client. Are they waiting for a treatment bed? Do they have housing? How are they generally doing in the community? And then on the Tuesday mornings, everybody comes to court and that information is shared with the judge. So it's usually the team member standing up and providing oral information about their client. And it's quite impressive to watch the team members do this because they have to maintain the therapeutic relationship they have with the client, but at the same time, let everybody know how they're doing. And they're extraordinarily respectful of the people that they are assisting. And I think we're all careful in terms of how we are addressing the client, what we're saying, because we want to support people as much as we can, but also hold them accountable and maintain that therapeutic relationship that they have with their team member. So if somebody is on bail and hasn't been sentenced yet, we call these progress reports, where information is shared about how the individual is doing. The prosecutor may decide if somebody's been doing well prior to being sentenced, that they're actually going to stay the charge if there's no longer a public interest in proceeding with the prosecution. If it goes to the sentencing phase, again, as a judge, I'm provided with much better information about this individual. I have a discussion with that person so that they feel like they are part of the process and people aren't just speaking about them or at them. And I'm able to ask questions of the team members, and there are a lot of joint submissions, but in terms of a probation order, as a judge, I'm able to incorporate conditions that support the work that the team is doing. And this can be very basic conditions, such as you will meet with your team member every day at 11 o'clock to get your medication. We can be very specific about what programs they're going to attend because we know what's already been set up. It's not a general counseling provision. It's this is where you're going to go. And that is much more effective from the team members' perspective because they have something else they can rely on. It's not just them working with the client. It's also, well, remember what the judge said, you also need to make sure you're doing what's on your probation order. if a client is sentenced to jail, and they are sometimes out of integrated court, we do pre-release planning. So the team members are meeting with the client in the jail to make sure that they have everything set up for their when they're released to be on their probation order. And we actually have a court appearance, usually a couple of weeks before they're going to be released, where we have a conversation with the individual, again, making sure everything's in place. We can tweak the conditions of the probation order if we now know a specific place they're going to live or program they're going to take. We can adjust the wording to be more specific, but trying to, as much as possible, set them up for success upon release from custody. And the other really cornerstone piece of integrated court is anybody who is on either a probation order or a conditional sentence order. After their sentence, they come back to court for reviews. These tend to be more frequent at the beginning, and then often it's left up to the team member to determine when somebody should come back to the court. But it's a very important process, part of the process. And I think for me as a judge, seeing somebody coming back who's doing well is not only very gratifying to me personally, but you can see in the client how proud they are to be able to come back to the court and talk about how they're doing. If somebody is struggling, we try to discuss as a team what else can be offered to this person, what changes can be made to the probation officer or to a probation order. And if the client knows they have to come back to court and they have to tell everybody that they haven't been doing that well, that is also a pretty powerful motivator for them. And we often see probation orders terminated earlier if people are doing really well. There have been a few evaluations of integrated court. We did one after the first year, and then there was another report done by some master's students at the University of Victoria looking at this. It's not all about recidivism. It's about other measurements of overall health and wellness. As a result of this court, we have seen a significant decrease in the number of police contacts that people are having in the community, a decrease in the number of hospital beds that people are using, and an increase in housing for these clients. We now have another integrated court in Kelowna that started 2 years ago. It's not easy to replicate across the province because the foundation is these outreach teams, and they don't exist everywhere. And we really have to have buy-in from the community as opposed to this being a court-driven initiative. But the early reports out of Kelowna is it's also making a significant difference in that community. Sometimes the difference is it highlights the gaps, and then other service providers step in, and that's been in Victoria. That was the housing piece was really challenging, and it's much better now. And I think the same is in Kelowna. So I wanted to make sure I've left time for any questions, but that's the no frills therapeutic court that's running out of Victoria and Kelowna.
So thank you, Associate Chief Judge Wishart. We have one hand up, so I think it's probably you have got your first initial, J. Dulude. If you wish to just jump in and unmute yourself, and please ask your question.
Actually, the question was for the previous speaker.
All right. Okay. My apologies there. I don't know if you could ask the same question of Associate Judge Wishart.
Perhaps. This is from Thunder Bay, Ontario, and we recently have just got funding to start drug treatment court here in Thunder Bay. So we went down to Toronto to see how they ran their model. Now, my understanding was that in drug treatment court, they're partial to accepting clientele who have illicit drug problems. However, the biggest problem here in this city for the clientele that we're likely to receive has to do with more with an alcohol use disorder rather than illicit drug use. I'm just wondering what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, I think that we as a justice system need to look more broadly at these issues, because that's one of the things that I'm approached about is we need a mental health court. We need, an alcohol addictions court. And most of the people that we see often, as I'm sure everybody knows, have more than one of these underlying issues. But I agree with your point that for a drug treatment court, there's a whole sector of people who are in the criminal justice system who aren't getting the access to the same type of services. And I think that there's certainly momentum, at least of thought, in terms of how do we help more people, and should there be treatment courts that are geared towards alcohol as the substance use. I think that would make a significant difference in a lot of communities. Just speaking as criminal defense counsel formally and as a judge, 70% of the things that come before court are alcohol related, whether it's mischief, property damage, interpersonal violence, assaults in downtown after the bars close. Alcohol is the underlying factor of so many of these things. So I think it's another area that is hopefully we're at the right moment in time when some effort can be put into addressing that. As all of these things come down to, though, it's usually a funding issue, and that's a political decision as in terms of where people's priorities lie. But you're quite correct. There is a disparity in terms of which populations are getting the available assistance.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, anybody? And Associate Judge Wishart, I think also this is just, I'm coming from a social work perspective. I'm a social worker by training. And so my personal belief is that people feel in our kind of society, modern industrialized society, people feel like atoms, like floating in the air and without any connections and without any attachment. And my interpretation of what you just said is that I think this is a wonderful way to connect people, right? People who are feeling lost in this big wide world, and connecting them to services, connecting them to treatment, connecting them to other fellow human being. I think and kind of that's the role that I think you're taking. I'm not sure what's your take on this, but this is just my theory here.
Yeah, and one of the other really neat parts of Victoria Integrated Court, this was a colleague of mine who's now retired, worked with a number of nonprofit organizations to start a community garden. And this is somewhere where we were able to have clients go to do community work service. And when they're finished their community work service, if they wish, they can stay on and work, and they share in the profits from that garden. And for some of the clients, they say it's the first time they've ever felt part of anything. And they're working alongside the probation officer will show up and spend a couple hours there. Judges show up and do a couple of hours in the garden. And so it really does, I think, highlight what you've just spoken about making people feel that they're part of something. And because often in court, things are just by the nature of the volume, things go very quickly. We don't have time to make it as personal as we should and treat people the way that I would like to be able to in a very busy court list. So I think that's a really important part of these sort of courts, is finding ways to be creative to make people feel that they have a sense of community and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, thank you, Associate Chief Judge Wishart. Thank you, amazing. I don't know, I just feel really nice and warm that our courts are almost I don't know what lack of better word, humanizing and kind of treating others as humans. So thank you for this wonderful presentation, and thank you for caring persons like yourself who's there in the trenches and kind of are there connecting people and connecting people who are there and these the justice system. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting
Yeah.
me today. And I know you're going to hear from Sharon Lockhart about the Vancouver Downtown Community Courts, and she'll let you know all the amazing things you can do when you do have money.
Thank you. Thank you. So